Hello, and welcome to the worldwarlab channel. Today's story takes us back to a moment when desperation, raw innovation, and sheer nerve collided in the skies over the Pacific. At 7:42 a.m. on August 17, 1942, Captain Paul Gunn crouched beneath the wing of a Douglas A-20 Havoc at Eagle Farm Airfield near Brisbane, watching mechanics weld .50 caliber machine guns into the bomber's nose, right where the bombardier's seat had once been. Gunn was 43 years old and had spent 21 years in the Navy. Somewhere far away, his wife and 4 children were imprisoned in a Japanese camp in Manila. The war was closing in on him from every direction. The 5th Air Force was losing bombers faster than replacements could be delivered. In July alone, the 3rd Attack Group had lost 11 A-20s while attempting to strike Japanese convoys from high altitude. The problem was painfully clear: bombardiers couldn't hit moving ships. Whenever crews dropped lower to improve accuracy, Japanese deck gunners tore the aircraft apart. Captain Ed Larner had watched 3 of his crews burn in the Coral Sea just the week before. Meanwhile, Japanese forces were reinforcing New Guinea almost without resistance. Gunn believed there was another way. If bombers flew low enough to skip bombs across the water like stones, they could smash ships at point-blank range. But surviving the approach was the real challenge. To do that, the aircraft would need overwhelming forward firepower to silence deck guns before they could respond. That meant transforming bombers into flying strafers. The obstacle was obvious. A-20 Havoc carried 4.30 caliber machine guns in its nose, and .30 caliber rounds bounced off ship armor like rain off steel. Gunn needed .50 caliber weapons, 4 of them, mounted in the nose, firing straight ahead at a combined rate of 1,700 rounds per minute. General George Kenney, newly appointed commander of the 5th Air Force, gave Gunn 1 week to prove the idea worked. Gunn scavenged .50 caliber guns stripped from wrecked P-39 and P-40 fighters that would never fly again. Their pilots were dead, but the guns were still usable. He mounted them on a steel frame inside the nose compartment. Each gun weighed 64 pounds, and with 4 guns plus 200 pounds of ammunition, the added mass shifted the aircraft's center of gravity dangerously forward. The first test flight nearly killed the pilot. The A-20 barely climbed and constantly tried to nose over. Gunn spent 2 days rebalancing the aircraft, shifting equipment aft and adjusting the tail trim. On the second test flight, the pilot reported that the plane flew like it was angry, but it flew. On September 12, 16 modified A-20s struck the Japanese airfield at Buna. The strafers came in at treetop height, their guns hammering non-stop. They destroyed 14 Japanese aircraft on the ground and suppressed every anti-aircraft position in the area. Not a single A-20 was lost. Kenney immediately wanted more, but the A-20 had limitations. Its range was too short to reach key Japanese bases beyond the Owen Stanley Mountains, and its bomb load was too small. Gunn needed a larger airframe, the B-25 Mitchell. It offered greater range, heavier payload, and more room for guns. In December, Gunn removed the bombardier and nose guns from a B-25C and installed 4.50 caliber guns in the nose. He added 4 more in external cheek mounts along the fuselage and rotated the top turret forward. That made 10 forward-firing guns. Then he added 2 more on each side, bringing the total to 14 guns, throwing more than 200 pounds of lead every second. The ground crew called the aircraft Pappy's Folly. If you want to see how Pappy's impossible gunship turned out, hit the like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this one, and subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Pappy. Gunn flew the prototype to Charters Towers to demonstrate it to the 3rd Attack Group. The aircraft was nose-heavy and wanted to drop out of the sky on takeoff. He had to hold full back pressure on the control stick just to keep it level. But once airborne, the B-25 became a flying destroyer. Kenney ordered 12 more conversions immediately. At Townsville, the 81st Air Depot Group worked 18-hour days modifying every available B-25. By February 1943, 30 strafers were ready for combat. Kenney then sent the blueprints to Wright Field, Ohio. Army Air Forces engineers studied the modifications for 3 days. Their response came back to Australia blunt and dismissive. The changes were impractical. The balance would be wrong. The aircraft would be too heavy. It wouldn't fly properly. They recommended grounding every modified B-25 at once. When the message arrived, Kenny was in Washington. He walked straight into General Hap Arnold's office, where the Wright Field engineers were waiting to explain why Pappy Gunn's gunship was impossible. Kenny told them that 12 of those impossible aircraft had just played a decisive role in destroying a Japanese convoy in the Bismarck Sea. Every transport had been sunk, and 60 more strafers were already being converted in Australia. Arnold practically threw the engineers out of his office. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea began with intelligence intercepts on February 28, 1943. Allied codebreakers in Melbourne decrypted Japanese naval messages revealing a convoy departing Rabaul. 8 transport ships escorted by 8 destroyers, carrying nearly 7,000 Japanese troops bound for Laos on the north coast of New Guinea. General Kenny had 72 hours to stop them. The convoy's route crossed the Bismarck Sea between New Britain and New Guinea, hundreds of miles of open water. Japanese commanders believed the weather would protect them. March was monsoon season, with low clouds, heavy rain, and poor visibility. Bombers couldn't hit what they couldn't see. They were right about the weather, but wrong about the bombers. On March 2nd, reconnaissance aircraft spotted the convoy steaming south through the Vitiaz Strait. B-17 flying fortresses attacked from 15,000 feet, dropping through breaks in the clouds. They released 137 bombs and claimed multiple hits. Post-battle analysis showed they sank nothing. High-altitude bombing against moving ships simply didn't work. The convoy kept moving. That night, the ships dispersed. Transports hugged the New Guinea coastline while destroyers formed a defensive screen. Japanese commanders believed they would reach Laos by dawn on March 4th, unload their troops under fighter cover, and turn the New Guinea campaign in Japan's favor. They had no idea what awaited them at first light. That evening, March 2nd, Captain Ed Larner briefed the 92nd Bomb Squadron at Port Moresby. 12 B-25 strafers, 30 modified A-20 Havocs, Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighters for top cover, and P-38 Lightnings to deal with Japanese Zeros. The strafers would attack at mast height, just 50 feet above the water, at point-blank gun range. The plan was brutally simple: overwhelm the deck guns with concentrated fire, skip bombs into the ships while the crews were stunned, and escape before the Zeros could respond. Larner had flown exactly one practice mission using this tactic. His navigator asked what would happen if a strafer was hit during the approach. Larner replied that they would find out tomorrow. The briefing ended at 2,200 hours. No one slept. At 6:30 on March 3rd, the strike force assembled over Cape Ward Hunt. 137 aircraft. The B-17s would attack first from altitude to draw the defensive fire upward. Then the strafers would strike from below. The Japanese convoy lay 70 miles northwest of Laos when the B-17s arrived. The heavy bombers attacked through broken cloud layers, and the transports answered by firing every gun they had. The sky filled with black bursts of flak. One B-17 took damage and turned back, but the others pressed on. Then the strafers appeared. Captain Ed Larner led the B-25s in from the southeast at wavetop height. Each aircraft carried 14 forward-firing guns, 168 guns across 12 strafers. They advanced line abreast, a solid wall of fire nearly 300 yards wide. The Japanese crew aboard the transport Kyakusei Maru spotted them at 2 miles. The ship's captain ordered a hard turn to starboard. It was far too late. At 800 yards, the B-25s opened fire. Streams of .50 caliber rounds tore across the surface of the sea like a spinning saw blade, climbing into the ship's superstructure. The bridge was shredded. Anti-aircraft crews were cut down before they could swing their guns. 3 B-25s released their bombs at barely 100 yards. The first bomb skipped off the water, slammed into the hull below the waterline, and detonated inside the engine room. The second struck amidships. The third missed. Kyakusei Maru was finished within 30 seconds of the strafer's arrival, burning fiercely and listing to port. It would sink 40 minutes later. And that was only the beginning. The transport Tio Maru tried to run. Its captain pushed the engines to full power, 15 knots at best. The B-25 strafers were screaming in at 240 knots. The calculation was brutal and simple. Four strafers boxed Tio Maru in from both sides. Converging streams of .50 caliber fire swept the deck. Anti-aircraft crews died at their stations. The bridge windows exploded inward. The executive officer took 3 rounds through the chest. The captain survived only 10 seconds longer before a burst cut him down. 8 bombs were dropped. 5 struck home. The ship broke apart. Japanese soldiers trapped below decks were torn apart when the hull split open. Most never reached the surface. The transport went under in 6 minutes. Survivors leapt into the Bismarck Sea wearing full combat gear, their packs dragging them beneath the waves. Royal Australian Air Force bowfighters raked the decks of the destroyer Shikanami as it attempted to shield the transports. Anti-aircraft fire hit one bowfighter, but the Australian pilot kept coming. His forward guns swept the destroyer from bow to stern. Japanese gun crews collapsed where they stood. When the B-25 strafers arrived, Shikanami had no defense left. 3 aircraft attacked from different directions. The destroyer tried to turn into the attack but was far too slow. Bombs struck the port side, starboard side, and amidships. The ship did not sink immediately, but it was effectively dead. Engines stopped, fire spreading. The crew abandoned ship 2 hours later. By 0900 hours on March 3rd, the Japanese convoy was scattered across 40 square miles of ocean. 5 transports were sinking or burning. 2 destroyers were crippled. The remaining ships attempted to flee. None succeeded. At 1400 hours, the strafers returned with fresh bombs and full ammunition belts. The Japanese had no fighter cover. Their Zeros had landed at La to refuel and were still on the ground when the second wave arrived. The transport Io Maru absorbed 12 bomb hits in the renewed attack. Its magazine detonated in a single massive explosion visible from Port Moresby, 130 miles away. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained, no wreckage, no survivors. 1,800 Japanese soldiers vanished in 3 seconds. Captain Ed Larner brought his strafer in low over another transport, Oigawamaru. His co-pilot counted 14 separate fires burning across the deck. Japanese soldiers were jumping into the sea. The anti-aircraft guns were silent. Larner's bombardier released at point-blank range. 2 bombs fell. Both struck. The transport settled by the stern, rolled, and capsized. Modified A-20 Havocs hunted down the crippled destroyers. The destroyer Asashio attempted to rescue survivors from the water. 3 A-20s attacked from different directions. The crew was focused on rescue operations and never saw the strafers until the guns opened fire. Asashio took bomb hits on the forward deck and bridge. It burned through the night and sank at dawn on March 4th. By the evening of March 3rd, the entire Japanese convoy had been annihilated. 8 transports sunk. 4 destroyers sunk. Of the nearly 7,000 Japanese troops that departed Rabaul, fewer than 1,200 reached La. About 2,700 were rescued and returned to Rabaul. The rest died in the Bismarck Sea. Allied losses totaled 4 aircraft, 1 B-17 and 3 P-38s, and 13 aircrew killed. General Douglas MacArthur later called it one of the most complete and annihilating combats in military history. The Japanese never again attempted to reinforce New Guinea by convoy. The balance of the war in the Southwest Pacific had shifted, and it shifted because of Paul Gunn's impossible gunship. Back in Australia, engineers at Wright Field were still drafting a formal report explaining why the B-25 modifications could not possibly work. On March 5th, Kenny sent a message to General Hap Arnold in Washington. The subject line read, "Commerce Destroyer Modifications Approved for Production." The body consisted of a single paragraph. 12 B-25 strafers had just destroyed an entire Japanese convoy. Immediate factory integration of the forward gun package into all B-25 production aircraft was requested. That same afternoon, Arnold called North American Aviation President J.H. Dutch Kindleberger. Kindleberger said his engineers needed to see the modifications for themselves. Arnold replied that he was sending the man who designed them. Paul Gunn was ordered to California. Gunn did not want to leave Australia. His wife, Pauline, and their 4 children were still imprisoned in the Santo Tomas internment camp in Manila, held by the Japanese since January 1942, 14 long months. He flew every mission believing each one might bring him closer to liberating the Philippines. Being sent to California meant flying in the wrong direction. Kenny made it a direct order. The 5th Air Force needed factory-built strafers, hundreds of them, and Gunn was the only man who could show North American aviation how it was really done. The general promised Gunn he would be back in the Pacific within 6 weeks. Gunn landed in Long Beach, California, on March 27, 1943. The North American aviation plant sprawled across 140 acres and employed more than 20,000 workers running 3 shifts around the clock. The assembly line rolled out a completed B-25 every 4 hours. Factory engineers gathered around Gunn's hand-drawn blueprints, studying the crude sketches that had rewritten air combat in the Pacific. They asked for stress calculations. Gunn told them he didn't have any. They asked about wind tunnel testing. Gunn said he had tested the design by flying it. They questioned the center of gravity problem. Gunn showed them where he had shifted the radio equipment aft to compensate. One engineer warned that the modifications would buckle the fuselage skin around the cheek gun mounts. The muzzle blast from the .50 caliber guns, he said, would tear the aluminum apart. Gunn calmly replied that it already had. Then he showed them the blast tubes he had welded on, extending past the propeller arc. The problem was solved. For 2 weeks, factory engineers reverse-engineered Gunn's battlefield modifications into proper production drawings. They reinforced the nose structure, redesigned the gun mounts, and added heavier-gauge aluminum patches to strengthen the fuselage skin. They calculated the exact shift in center of gravity and adjusted the tail trim to match. On May 10, 1943, the first factory-built B-25G strafer rolled off the line. It carried 4.50 caliber machine guns in a solid nose and a 75mm M4 cannon mounted in the forward fuselage. The cannon fired the same ammunition used by the M3 Lee tank. A single shell could punch a destroyer below the waterline. Gunn test flew the prototype himself. When the 75mm cannon fired, it recoiled nearly 4 feet. The entire aircraft shuddered violently. The navigator had to reload the cannon by hand between shots. The rate of fire was 1 round every 30 seconds. Gunn told the engineers it would work against ships, probably not against anything that could move very fast. North American Aviation built 400 B-25G strafers. Then they refined the design further. The B-25H added 4 more .50 caliber guns in the cheek packs, bringing the total to 8 guns in the nose, 4 in the cheeks, and 2 in the top turret rotated forward, 14 forward-firing guns in all. The H model retained the 75mm cannon but added an improved recoil system. The navigator could reload faster, increasing the rate of fire to 1 round every 20 seconds. The B-25J removed the cannon entirely and added 4 more .50 caliber guns, bringing the total to 18 forward-firing guns, making it the most heavily armed production bomber ever built. North American Aviation produced 4,900 B-25JS. The first of them reached the Pacific in October 1943. Gunn returned to Australia in May. He had been gone exactly 6 weeks. His family was still imprisoned in Manila. The strafers kept hunting. In April 1943, B-25s destroyed 16 Japanese barges carrying troops and supplies near Finschhafen. In May, they sank 12 cargo ships at Wewak Harbor. In June, they struck the oil facilities at Balikpapan on Borneo. The Japanese stopped moving supplies by ship during daylight hours. It didn't matter. The strafers adapted. They learned to attack at night using radar. They learned to skip bomb from 50 feet in complete darkness. They coordinated with PT boats that illuminated targets with searchlights at the last possible second. The Japanese gave the modified B-25s a name of their own. They called them the Black Death. They were not wrong. On November 2, 1943, Major Ben Farrow led 4 squadrons of strafers into Rabaul Harbor. A total of 137 Allied aircraft took part, including 59 B-25s. Inside the harbor lay 38 Japanese vessels, cruisers, destroyers, tankers, cargo ships, and minesweepers. The strafers roared in at masthead height through thick phosphorus smoke that blinded the anti-aircraft gunners. They attacked from multiple directions at once. The Japanese defenders couldn't track them all. In 15 minutes, 30 ships were hit. 5 sank outright. 12 were damaged beyond repair. The rest limped away. Rabaul Harbor was finished as a forward supply base. Gunn flew that mission himself. He was 44 years old. He didn't have to fly combat missions anymore. He was officially a special projects officer assigned to headquarters staff. But his family was still in Manila, and every mission felt like one step closer. Intelligence reports from the Santo Tomas internment camp were growing worse. Food rations had been cut again. Medicine was nearly gone. Prisoners were dying from malnutrition and disease. The Japanese camp commander informed the Red Cross that all prisoners would be executed if Allied forces approached Manila. Gunn told Kenny he wanted to fly the very first mission over Manila when liberation came. Kenny promised him he would. The strafers continued to evolve through 1944. Some carried 8 5-inch high-velocity rockets under their wings. Others carried napalm tanks. Some were equipped with parafrag bombs, small fragmentation bombs with parachutes that allowed the B-25 to drop them from extremely low altitude without being caught in the blast. The most effective tactic was the combined strike. High-level B-24 Liberators bombed from 20,000 feet, forcing defenders to aim upward. Then the strafers came in low. By the time the gunners looked down, the B-25s were already on top of them. In the first 8 months of 1944 alone, 5th Air Force strafers destroyed 947 Japanese aircraft on the ground. They sank 273 ships. An estimated 38,000 Japanese soldiers were killed. The modified B-25 had become the decisive weapon of the Southwest Pacific Campaign. Gunn kept refining the aircraft as the war went on. He added extra fuel tanks to extend range. He improved gun cooling systems. He developed new ammunition loading techniques that increased rates of fire. Some B-25s in the Pacific carried modifications found nowhere else in the world because Gunn had invented them the night before a mission. Other theater commanders wanted strafers of their own. Kenny sent them the plans. In the Mediterranean, B-25s were modified for anti-shipping strikes against German convoys supplying North Africa. In the China-Burma-India theater, B-25s were adapted to attack Japanese supply lines along the Burma Road. What began as a desperate field experiment in Brisbane spread to every major combat zone. On October 20, 1944, American forces landed at Leyte in the Philippines. The liberation of Manila was only 3 months away. Gunn's family had been in captivity for nearly 3 years. He was flying multiple missions every day now. He told his crew chief he wouldn't stop until his family was free. Then the Japanese bombed Tacloban airfield. At 3:30 hours on November 27, 1944, Japanese bombers struck Tacloban airfield. 56 aircraft, Mitsubishi G-4M Betty bombers escorted by Zero fighters came in low from the north. Radar operators detected them too late. Gunn was inside the operations tent, reviewing mission plans for the next morning's strike, when the first bombs fell. The tent stood barely 200 yards from the main runway, far too close. The blast wave slammed him to the ground. Shrapnel ripped through the canvas walls. One fragment tore into Gunn's left leg. Another struck his shoulder. The medical officer found him trying to get back on his feet, blood soaking through his flight suit. Gunn said he needed to check on his aircraft. The doctor told him he needed surgery. Gunn managed to stagger 30 feet before collapsing. He was evacuated to the hospital at Leyte. The leg wound was severe. Shrapnel had severed an artery. The surgeon told him he wouldn't fly again for at least 6 months, possibly longer. The injuries qualified him for medical retirement. He was 45 years old, with 26 years of service split between the Navy and the Army. He had earned the right to go home. Gunn told the surgeon he wasn't leaving until his family was free. The Battle of Manila began on February 3, 1945. American forces fought their way through the city house by house. The Japanese had declared Manila a fortress. Every street would be defended. The fighting was savage, building by building, block by block. Santo Tomas internment camp was liberated on February 3. 3,700 Allied prisoners were freed. Gunn's wife, Pauline, weighed 89 pounds. His daughter Julia weighed 63. They had survived for a year on 1 meal a day, thin rice and vegetable soup. His son Nathaniel was suffering from malaria. His youngest daughter had dysentery. But they were alive. Against medical orders, Gunn flew to Manila on February 4. His leg was still wrapped in bandages. He walked with a cane. The doctor had cleared him only for light duty, no combat flying. Gunn ignored headquarters and went straight to Santo Tomas. He found his family in a makeshift hospital set up by the Army. Pauline didn't recognize him at first. He had lost 40 pounds since she last saw him in April 1942. 3 years earlier. His hair was completely gray. She thought he was a doctor. Then he spoke her name, and she knew. The official Army report stated that Colonel Paul Gunn was reunited with his family on February 4, 1945, at Santo Tomas internment camp, Manila. The reunion lasted 4 hours. Then Gunn returned to Leyte. His medical leave wasn't finished, but the war wasn't either. The modified B-25s kept flying. Other pilots. Other crews. But still guns. By the end of the war, North American aviation had built 9,600 B-25 Mitchell bombers. Nearly 5,000 of them were strafer variants with forward gun packages based on Gunn's original design. Those strafers sank more than 800 Japanese ships across the Pacific. They destroyed over 2,000 Japanese aircraft on the ground. They killed an estimated 85,000 Japanese soldiers. The commerce destroyer concept engineers once called impossible had become the most effective anti-shipping weapon in the theater. Gunn never flew combat again. The leg wound ended his operational career. The Army retired him as a full colonel on June 30, 1948, on medical disability. He was 48 years old. He returned to the Philippines and rebuilt Philippine Airlines, the company he had founded before the war. Philippine Airlines resumed operations in 1946. Gunn started with 3 war-surplus C-47 transport aircraft, flying routes between Manila, Cebu, Davao, and other Philippine cities. The airline he had once operated with 5 Beechcraft planes before the war now expanded across the entire archipelago. In 1947, the Philippine government awarded him the Distinguished Service Star. President Manuel Roxas presented the medal personally. The citation read, "For extraordinary heroism and exceptional service to the Republic of the Philippines during the Liberation Campaign." Colonel Gunn's innovative aircraft modifications had directly contributed to the defeat of Japanese forces and the freedom of the Filipino people. The United States military had already decorated him, Distinguished Flying Cross with Oak Leaf Cluster, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Air Medal, 9 Purple Hearts. The Distinguished Service Cross was recommended but never approved. Some officers argued that Gunn's contributions were technical rather than tactical. They were wrong. General Kenny later wrote in his memoirs, "Pappy Gunn was the most valuable man in the 5th Air Force. His mechanical genius and combat innovations changed the course of the war in the Southwest Pacific. Without his strafer modifications, The Battle of the Bismarck Sea would have been a Japanese victory. Without Bismarck Sea, we would have lost New Guinea. Without New Guinea, the road to the Philippines would have been impossible. MacArthur agreed. In a classified letter to the War Department dated July 1945, he recommended Gunn for promotion to brigadier general. The recommendation was denied. The Army Air Forces were reducing their force structure. Promotions were frozen. Gunn remained a colonel. He never complained. He had achieved what he fought for. His family was free. The Philippines were liberated. The Japanese were defeated. That was enough. Philippine Airlines continued to expand through the late 1940s and early 1950s. Gunn acquired DC-3s, then DC-4s, then Convair 340s. The airline opened routes to Hong Kong, Bangkok, and Singapore. By 1956, PAL was flying to San Francisco. What began as a small inter-island carrier had become an international airline. Gunn flew constantly, Manila to Cebu, Cebu to Davao, Davao to Hong Kong. He couldn't stop. The war had taught him that movement meant survival, and standing still meant death. Some of his pilots said Gunn was still fighting, still outrunning something. Maybe the memory of Santo Tomas. Maybe the faces of the men who flew his modified aircraft and never came back. On October 10, 1957, Gunn chartered a Beechcraft Model 18 twin-engine aircraft. He was flying from Manila to Baguio, a routine trip roughly 140 miles north. The weather forecast called for scattered thunderstorms over the Cordillera Mountains, nothing severe. He filed his flight plan at 0800 hours. Departure time, 0930. Expected arrival, 1100 hours. The tower cleared him for takeoff at 9:28. The weather deteriorated far faster than forecast. By 10:30, the Cordillera Mountains were completely socked in, heavy rain, collapsing visibility, violent turbulence. At 10:47, the Beechcraft's radio went silent. Search and rescue teams located the wreckage 3 days later on a mountainside near Baguio. The aircraft had flown directly into a storm cell. The pilots attempted to climb above it, but powerful winds forced the plane into a ridge. The impact killed everyone on board instantly. Paul Gunn died on October 11, 1957. He was 57 years old. He would have turned 58 in 1 week. The Philippine government granted him a state funeral. More than 6,000 people attended: American veterans, Philippine Airlines employees, and former prisoners from Santo Tomas. General Kenny sent a wreath from the United States. The Manila Times published Gunn's obituary on October 12. The headline read, "War Hero Dies in Plane Crash." The article mentioned his distinguished flying cross, his role in the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, and his missions during the liberation of the Philippines, but it couldn't truly capture what he had done. The numbers told part of the story. Nearly 5,000 B-25 strafers built using his modifications. More than 800 Japanese ships sunk. Over 2,000 aircraft destroyed on the ground. An estimated 85,000 enemy soldiers killed. Those were the official statistics. But the real impact went deeper. Before Gunn, bombers dropped ordnance from altitude. After Gunn, bombers became multi-role weapons, capable of strafing, skip bombing, and close air support. The AC-130 gunship used in Vietnam was a direct descendant of Gunn's B-25 innovations. So was the A-10 Warthog. So was every modern attack aircraft designed around forward-firing guns. North American Aviation hired Gunn as a consulting engineer in 1948. He worked on the B-25 Tornado jet bomber. He advised on gun mounting systems and designed forward-firing armament packages. The company paid him well. He donated much of that money to veterans organizations. His son, Nathaniel, joined the Air Force, flew B-52s in Vietnam, retired as a colonel, and later wrote a book about his father titled Pappy Gunn. It was published in 1994 and sold 12,000 copies. Most people had never heard of Paul Gunn. Today, The National Museum of the Pacific War in Fredericksburg, Texas, displays one of Gunn's original gun mount drawings. The paper is yellowed. The measurements are handwritten in pencil. The sketch shows 4.50 caliber machine guns mounted inside the nose of an A-20 Havoc. No stress calculations. No computer models. Just a simple drawing that helped destroy thousands of enemy soldiers in the Bismarck Sea. In 2008, the Air Force Association inducted Gunn into the Air Force Enlisted Heritage Hall. The citation referenced his innovations, his combat record, and his lasting influence on modern attack aviation. The ceremony was held in Washington, D.C. 3 of his grandchildren were in attendance. Philippine Airlines still operates today. The company flies to 42 destinations across Asia, Australia, and North America. At its headquarters in Manila, a portrait of Gunn hangs in the main lobby. Most employees walk past it every day without knowing who he was. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do us a favor. Hit the like button. Every single like tells YouTube to share this story with more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about mechanics, pilots, and innovators who saved thousands of lives with field modifications and impossible ideas. Real people. Real heroism. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. The United States? The United Kingdom? Canada? Australia? The Philippines? Our community spans the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us where you are. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure Pappy Gunn doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.